Hello, and thanks for joining us here on Encore. Coming up on today's show. From the stars of cinema to catwalk queens and even a French president, Bettina Rheims has photographed some iconic faces. Her editorial shoots underlining an interest in gender, religion and sexuality. Rheims has now set up her studio in an unlikely setting, photographing women in French prisons for a new show, Détenues, or Inmates. She's in the studio to tell us more. Bettina Rheims, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Your new photography show, Détenues or Inmates, is currently on show at the Château de Vincennes here in Paris. The portrait format is not new for you. That's something you do a lot. But the setting of these photos is new. They were taken in women's penitentiary facilities. Why did you decide to go to a prison for your photos?
Well, I'd been thinking about it for a long time. I have a close friend who used to be the Minister of Justice, Robert Badinter. And every time I saw him, he would go on and on with this idea that nobody took attention, nobody spoke about women in prison. It was something that society didn't want to show. And then one day he handed me a piece of cardboard with an email of someone on it. And he said, send an email to this woman. And he's quite persuasive and he's somebody I respect very much. So I wrote a letter. It's like sending a bottle in the sea, and I thought, no one is ever going to come back to me. And 6 months later, they asked me to go see them and tell them about my project. And they liked it. I had read a lot about inmates or women who had been in prison, about their needs, their necessities, their frustrations. And all of them had one thing in common. They said, you get to prison, there's no mirror, there's no good food, there's nothing to keep on, your femininity and keep on being a woman, so you just lose yourself because nobody looks at you anymore. And most of these women are there because of what men have done to them, but at the same time not being looked at by men anymore. They lose their femininity. They lose their self-confidence. So I thought, I can open the door for them. That's not the point. They're being judged and they're serving their time. But I can maybe open a little window.
Mm-hmm. Well, indeed. Let's take a look at some of those portraits from the show Détenues. Now, your photos are actually exhibited in a religious space. It's the chapel within the castle at Vincennes. It's a very interesting choice. What do you think the space brings to the photos?
It brings some serenity, maybe something. It brings up the whole thing. I mean, it puts it in a space where usually photographs are not exhibited, and these women need to be looked at. And it's very... I thought it was very respectful to show them there. You see, when you look at those portraits, either they're looking at me straight in the camera, and the look is the one of sadness, terrible sadness and loneliness, or they're looking away. And those who are looking away, you have the impression that they're gone somewhere. It is very hard. Prisons in France are very hard. It's very hard for both of them, but it's very hard for women, particularly.
Indeed, you mentioned the word respect. In fact, I went to see the show, and the sense of respect and emotion was quite tangible among visitors. Let's hear from some of them.
certaines nous regardent.
Some look back at us as if they're saying, "What do you think of me?"
Et en même temps,
At the same time, we can't completely detach ourselves from the fact that if they are there, then something happened to them in their past.
s'est passé dans leur vie.
On voit bien la réalité, quoi. On voit que c'est pas des
We
femmes
see the
heureuses,
reality
des
that
femmes
these are not happy women.
qui sont mal, quoi.
We see that they're
Quand j'étais
suffering,
aux
they aren't
États-Unis,
feeling
j'ai fait de la
well.
prison, moi, parce que j'ai fait
When I was in the military, I did some
militaire,
time.
donc
I did
j'étais
something
j'étais
stupid, so I
4 mois en
spent
prison.
4 months in prison.
Donc j'étais seul dans une
I
cellule.
was alone in a
Je
cell,
sais
so I
ce que
know
c'est
what
que
it's
pendant
like.
4 mois,
I led the life of a
la
prisoner.
vie d'un prisonnier.
it's
donc
true, you
c'est
don't
vrai
feel
que,
good.
On n'est pas bien, quoi.
Je trouve c'est très touchant.
I found it
très
very
émouvant.
touching,
Elles
very
ont tous des
moving.
regards un petit peu perdus.
They all look
On se
quite
pose
lost
la
in their
question, qu'est-ce
expressions.
qu'elles ont fait malgré tout
It makes us
derrière
think,
ça.
what
Des
did they
femmes qui n'ont
do?
pas de miroir, justement,
These are
en
women who
prison.
don't have
On a
access
vu
to
sur
mirrors in
Internet, c'est un
prison,
miroir.
as I read
Du
online.
coup, elles ont eu
So they finally had a chance to see
possibilité de se voir
themselves
enfin en
as
tant que
women.
femmes.
Now, I had the same reaction as that last woman when she talks about the expression. Some of them have trouble meeting your gaze. You look at them, but they don't necessarily look back at you. Did you direct the women?
You see, it was a big thing for them because they had been expecting that portrait for many, many weeks and preparing themselves for it and putting on their best clothes. And we helped them by bringing makeup and hair and, help them to restore this women image that somewhere is lost. It's always the same thing, whether I photograph a movie star or somebody in detention. I let them start and then I direct, but I don't direct so much that they would, get tense and would lose it. It's a conversation with gestures more than with words. With each of them, I've spent about an hour. But before I could start my camera, they needed to talk. So I had to listen to them for a very long time.
And indeed, there are phrases that I think you got from these conversations that are written in the exhibition and the accompanying book. These are anonymous phrases that talk about their aspirations, previous home lives. Why was it important to include that text?
One of the promises I made to them, of course, I would send them their picture, but I promised them that whatever they would tell me would remain anonymous. Because they told me very, very deep secrets. Most of them told me what they had done, which they won't even tell to the girl who sleeps with them in the same cell. So every night I had to clean myself from all this misery, from all this pain. So I would record in my telephone bits and pieces that I remembered.
Now, prior to this project, some of your best-known work has been in fashion and indeed portraits of women in very different, more empowered settings. We actually asked art historian Nadège Lannéry-Dagen to explain a little more about your approach.
Le travail de Bettina Rheims est connu principalement.
Bettina Rheims is known mainly for her series of work on women who represent a certain standard of beauty, of celebrity, of love life, or eroticism. People forget, I think, that she's also interested in all kinds of femininity, or quite simply, life. She recently created a series on Femin, and more precisely on militant women, women who are militant with their bodies and their ideas.
Militantes avec leur corps, militantes avec leurs idées.
Now, that word militancy is very interesting because how do you think that creating images or featuring in images in the society we live in today contributes to militancy? Can it have a political function as well?
Well, I especially hope so with that project. I mean, we have to know we're only artists. I mean, an artist can only put their work out and hope that people will see it. But at that point, there's so much to be done about the prison and especially for women, that I hope somebody, in the political world will pick this up and start working on a new project. But I mean, there's no safety about that. It's just we show things. We try to show things in a way that people have not seen them before. We try to open doors on different subjects. I work I've been working for 30 years on the gender question when nobody wanted to look at that. I remember my first work I did with a transsexual back in the 70s. I mean, not even my family wanted to look at those pictures. And the last advertising campaign I did for a major Italian company, it was a fashion shoot, and there was 8 people on the set, and all of them were transsexuals. So, of course, I wasn't the only one, to work on the subject but we, slowly by slowly, we built little walls.
It comes into the collective consciousness. Now, just before we leave, we asked you to flag up a cultural highlight of your own, and it seems that these are more moving images than stills. You've been bitten by the Netflix bug, and you told us about the series Casa de Papel. Tell us a little bit more about why you like it.
Oh, I loved it. I'm a big series eater because I don't go out at night, because I work so much. I go home and watch series. La Casa de Papel, the paper house, is the story of an amazing robbery, but it's so brilliant, so intelligent. The characters are so amazing. I immediately fell in love with the main character. I fall in love with movies, I fall in love with guys, and it's fantastic. The first season is finished, nothing yet. You just want to get home and see what's happening next. Okay. I love it. I really recommend it.
Want to check out. Bettina Rheims, thanks so much for joining us today. We'll leave you with a clip of Casa de Papel, and you can see Bettina's show, Détenues, or Inmates, at the Château de Vincennes until the end of April. Remember to check out our website, and you can also keep up with Encore on social media too. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
La familia de este país estará preguntando qué estamos haciendo.
¿Qué vamos a robar?
La Fábrica Nacional de Moneda y Timbre. Es fundamental que la policía no tenga ni la más mínima idea de lo que estamos haciendo. Mucho cuidado, porque en el momento en el que haya una sola gota de sangre dejaremos de ser unos Robin Hoods para convertirnos simplemente en unos hijos de puta.